The autumn of 2019 brought unseasonable warmth to Cedar Falls, Michigan. But inside the cramped conference room at Mercy General Hospital, the air felt suffocating. Marcus Rodriguez sat hunched forward in a plastic chair, his calloused hands gripping his construction helmet as he stared at the linoleum floor. Across from him, Dr. Patricia Henley's voice seemed to echo from somewhere far away, though she sat less than 3 feet from him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm sorry, Marcus, we've done everything we can. The cancer has spread to her liver and lungs. We're looking at weeks, maybe a month at most. The words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Behind him, he could hear his 8-year-old daughter Sophia's quiet breathing as she colored in her activity book, blissfully unaware that their world was about to shatter completely. Marcus had insisted on bringing her to this appointment because Linda, his wife of 10 years, had been too weak to watch her at home. He thought it would be routine, another round of encouraging news about her treatment progress. Instead, he was learning that the woman who had saved him from a life of aimless wandering was dying. Marcus Rodriguez had never imagined himself as a family man. At 28, he had been drifting through life, picking up construction jobs across the Midwest, sleeping in his truck more often than in actual beds. He had grown up in Detroit's foster care system, bouncing between homes that ranged from indifferent to outright hostile. By the time he aged out at 18, he had developed a thick shell around his heart and a deep-seated belief that he was better off alone. That all changed on a rainy Tuesday in Lansing when his truck broke down outside a small diner called Rosie's. While waiting for a tow truck, he had ordered coffee and pie, intending to kill time before figuring out his next move. The waitress who served him was Linda Brennan, a nursing student working part-time to pay for school. She had warm brown eyes, an infectious laugh, and a way of making even strangers feel like they mattered. "You look like a man carrying the weight of the world," she had said, refilling his coffee cup for the 3rd time. "Want to talk about it?" Marcus had found himself opening up to this woman in ways he never had before. He told her about his childhood, his fears of commitment, his dreams of maybe settling down somewhere if he could find a reason to stop running. Linda listened without judgment, offering gentle observations that helped him see his life from a different perspective. By the time his truck was repaired 2 days later, Marcus knew he couldn't leave Lansing without seeing her again. Their courtship had been a slow, careful dance. Linda understood his hesitation about relationships, and she never pushed him for more than he was ready to give. She introduced him to her close-knit family, parents who welcomed him like a son, siblings who treated him like he'd always belonged. For the first time in his life, Marcus experienced what it felt like to be part of something bigger than himself. They married 2 years later in a small ceremony at Linda's childhood church. Marcus had never been particularly religious, but Linda's faith was an integral part of who she was, and he found comfort in the rituals and community that came with it. He started attending services regularly, not because he felt obligated, but because the messages of hope and redemption resonated with his own journey from isolation to belonging. When Sophia was born, Marcus discovered a capacity for love he didn't know existed. This tiny, perfect human being looked at him with complete trust and adoration, seeing him not as a former foster kid with abandonment issues, but simply as daddy. He would spend hours just watching her sleep, marveling at the miracle that had brought him from sleeping in his truck to having a family of his own. Linda had been the anchor that kept their small family grounded and growing. She finished nursing school while Marcus established his own small construction company, taking on residential projects in Cedar Falls and the surrounding communities. They bought a modest 3-bedroom house on Maple Street with a big backyard where Sophia could play and Linda could tend her beloved flower garden. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, the first real home Marcus had ever known. Linda threw herself into community life with characteristic enthusiasm. She volunteered at Sophia's elementary school, organized neighborhood cleanups, and coordinated meal trains for families facing hardships. Through her work at the hospital, she had developed a reputation for going above and beyond for her patients. staying late to comfort frightened children, or helping elderly patients navigate insurance paperwork. Everyone who knew Linda Rodriguez loved her, and by extension, they had welcomed Marcus into the fabric of Cedar Falls society. The first sign that something was wrong came during Sophia's 7th birthday party. Linda had been experiencing what she dismissed as persistent heartburn, but during the celebration, she had suddenly doubled over in pain. Marcus rushed her to the emergency room, where initial tests suggested gallbladder issues. It should have been a minor problem, easily treatable with laparoscopic surgery, but when the surgeon opened her up, he found something else entirely. The gallbladder inflammation was actually a rare form of pancreatic cancer that had already begun spreading to nearby organs. At 32 years old, Linda Rodriguez received a diagnosis that typically came with a life expectancy measured in months, not years. The next 18 months became a blur of treatments, surgeries, and increasingly desperate attempts to buy more time. Linda approached her illness with the same determination she brought to everything else in her life. She researched treatment options, sought second opinions, and maintained an optimistic outlook that sometimes felt forced but never felt false. Marcus watched his wife fight with every ounce of strength she possessed, and he fell in love with her courage even as he mourned the future they were losing. Throughout it all, Linda continued working part-time when she was able, unwilling to let her illness define her completely. She insisted on maintaining as much normalcy as possible for Sophia's sake, attending school events when her energy permitted and helping with homework even on her worst days. Marcus marveled at her ability to compartmentalize her suffering, saving her tears for private moments when Sophia was asleep and presenting a brave face to the world. The financial strain of Linda's illness had been devastating, even with insurance. The experimental treatments and frequent hospital stays created bills that quickly overwhelmed their modest savings. Marcus had been forced to turn down several large construction projects to be available for Linda's appointments and Sophia's needs. Their comfortable middle-class life gradually gave way to a precarious balancing act of medical expenses and diminishing income. Marcus had applied for various assistance programs, swallowing his pride to fill out forms that detailed their financial desperation. Some help had come through, but it wasn't enough to cover the mounting costs. He had quietly begun selling their possessions, Linda's jewelry, his tool collection, even Sophia's college savings account, to pay for treatments that offered hope but no guarantees. Now, sitting in Dr. Henley's office on this warm October afternoon, Marcus realized that all their fighting, all their sacrifices, all their desperate hope had led to this moment. Linda was going to die, and he would be left to raise Sophia alone while drowning in medical debt. The life they had built together, the stability he had never experienced as a child, was crumbling around him just as surely as Linda's body was failing her. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Dr. Henley's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. "Do you have questions about hospice care? We can arrange for Linda to be comfortable at home during this time." Marcus looked up, his throat too tight to speak. Behind him, Sophia hummed quietly as she colored, still lost in her 8-year-old world where Mommy being sick was just a temporary inconvenience that would eventually resolve itself. How was he supposed to tell her that Mommy wasn't going to get better? How was he supposed to explain that their little family was about to become even smaller? "Can I have some time to process this?" Marcus finally managed to say. "To talk to Linda about what she wants." Dr. Henley nodded with the practiced compassion of someone who delivered devastating news regularly. "Of course, take all the time you need. My office will coordinate with hospice services whenever you're ready." As they walked to the parking lot, Sophia chattered about her artwork and the vending machine snacks she had convinced Marcus to buy. During the long appointment, her innocence felt both precious and heartbreaking. Marcus lifted her into her booster seat, his hands shaking slightly as he buckled her seatbelt. "Daddy, is Mommy going to come home soon?" Sophia asked as Marcus started the engine. "Yes, sweetheart. She's coming home tomorrow." The words felt like glass in his throat. "Good. I want to show her my picture. I drew our whole family. See?" Sophia held up her coloring book page, which showed 3 stick figures standing in front Of a house with a carefully colored garden. That's you, that's me. And that's Mommy with her favorite flowers. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at his daughter's proud smile and felt his heart break completely. In less than 24 hours, he would have to begin the process of explaining to this beautiful, trusting child that their family of 3 was about to become a family of 2, and somehow, he would have to figure out how to hold their lives together when he felt like he was falling apart himself. The drive home took them through the heart of Cedar Falls, past the elementary school where Linda volunteered, past the church where they were married, past the park where they took Sophia for weekend picnics. Each familiar landmark felt like a goodbye. This town that had welcomed him and helped him build a life was about to become a place haunted by memories of what he was losing. As Marcus pulled into their driveway, he noticed Mrs. Patterson from next door working in her front yard. She waved enthusiastically, probably eager for an update on Linda's latest treatment. Marcus waved back automatically, already dreading the conversations he would soon have to navigate. How do you tell an entire community that the person they all loved and depended on was dying? How do you accept casseroles and condolences when all you want to do is rage against the unfairness of it all? Inside their house, Marcus helped Sophia with her afternoon snack while trying to process the magnitude of what lay ahead. The medical bills would continue even after Linda was gone. His construction business, already struggling from his reduced availability, would need to support them both. Sophia would need counseling, stability, and probably a million other things he didn't know how to provide as a single parent. But more than any practical concern, Marcus was terrified of failing the person who had saved him from a life of emptiness. Linda had taken a chance on a broken man with no family and no roots, and she had helped him discover that he was capable of love, commitment, and growth. She had trusted him with her heart and their daughter's future. Now he would have to prove that her faith in him hadn't been misplaced. As the afternoon wore on and Sophia played quietly in her room, Marcus sat at their kitchen table surrounded by the detritus of a life being measured in medical appointments and insurance claims. Bills were stacked in neat piles according to urgency. Medication schedules were taped to the refrigerator, and hospital discharge papers created a paper trail of decline that no amount of hope could reverse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The phone rang, startling him from his dark thoughts. The caller ID showed Linda's parents' number, and Marcus realized he would have to share Dr. Henley's news with them tonight. Then her siblings, their friends at church, Sophia's teachers, the neighbors who had become like family. Each conversation would require him to say the words out loud again, making Linda's death sentence more real with every repetition. As the sun began to set through their kitchen window, Marcus Rodriguez sat in the home that Linda had made for them and tried to imagine a future. Without her guiding presence, he had survived an unstable childhood and found his way to love and belonging against all odds. But this challenge felt different, more daunting than anything he had faced before. This time, he wouldn't just be responsible for his own survival. He would be responsible for helping his daughter navigate the loss of the most important person in her young life. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who had once been nobody's family was about to become someone's only family, just as that foundation was being ripped away. Tomorrow, he would have to start learning how to be enough for Sophia when he felt like he wasn't enough for anyone, including himself. Linda Rodriguez died on a Tuesday morning in November, 3 weeks after Dr. Henley's devastating prognosis. She passed peacefully in their bedroom, holding Marcus's hand while Sophia slept in the next room, unaware that her world was changing forever. The hospice nurse arrived 20 minutes later, and suddenly their house filled with people who spoke in hushed tones about arrangements and next steps while Marcus sat frozen in the chair. Beside an empty bed, the funeral drew nearly 400 people to St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. Marcus watched in stunned amazement as the sanctuary overflowed with faces he recognized, and many he didn't. Patients Linda had cared for, families she had helped through difficult times, colleagues who spoke of her extraordinary compassion. Pastor Williams struggled to keep his composure as he delivered the eulogy. describing Linda as a light that burned so brightly it illuminated everyone around her. Sophia sat between Marcus and Linda's mother throughout the service, her small hand clutching a drawing she had made for Mommy the night before. At 8 years old, she understood that Mommy was gone, but seemed convinced this was temporary, like a very long business trip. She asked Marcus repeatedly when they could visit Mommy in heaven, and whether they needed to pack a suitcase for the journey. The weeks following the funeral blurred together in a haze of casseroles, sympathy cards, and well-meaning visitors who didn't know what to say. Marcus's construction business ground to a halt as he struggled to focus on anything beyond basic survival. He turned down every job offer, unable to imagine leaving Sophia alone while he worked on rooftops and building sites. The bills continued arriving with relentless regularity: medical expenses, funeral costs, and the ordinary expenses of daily life that somehow felt insurmountable without Linda's income and emotional support. December brought the first real crisis. Sophia's behavior began deteriorating at school with alarming speed. Her teacher, Mrs. Chen, called to report that Sophia had become withdrawn and angry, refusing to participate in class activities and lashing out at classmates who tried to include her in playground games. The bright, social child who had been excited about second grade was now hiding in bathroom stalls during recess and falling asleep during story time. She's processing grief in ways that are normal for her age, the school counselor explained during a conference that made Marcus feel like a failure as a parent. But she needs professional support beyond what we can provide here. Have you considered therapy? Marcus had considered therapy, along with a dozen other things Sophia might need. But therapy cost money they didn't have, and their insurance covered only a fraction of mental health services. He was already juggling payment plans for Linda's medical bills, and their savings account had been emptied months ago. The modest life insurance policy Linda carried through the hospital would help eventually, but the claims process moved with bureaucratic slowness while their needs felt immediate and urgent. Christmas arrived like a cruel joke. Marcus had always left holiday preparations to Linda, who approached each season with infectious enthusiasm. She spent weeks decorating their house, baking cookies for neighbors, and organizing elaborate gift exchanges with extended family. This year, Marcus stared at boxes of ornaments in the basement and felt completely overwhelmed. How was he supposed to create Christmas magic when he could barely manage to keep Sophia fed and clean? He attempted a scaled-down celebration, purchasing gifts with money borrowed against his truck and assembling a small artificial tree in their living room, but Sophia seemed to sense the forced nature of his efforts. On Christmas morning, she opened her presents politely, but without excitement, then spent the rest of the day curled up in Linda's closet, surrounded by clothes that still smelled like her mother's perfume. Why didn't Mommy leave me anything for Christmas? Sophia asked that evening, her voice small and confused. She always made me special presents. Marcus realized with crushing guilt that he had overlooked the handmade gifts Linda created each year, whereupon scarves, painted picture frames, photo albums filled with memories of their adventures together. In his grief and exhaustion, he had reduced Christmas to store-bought toys that felt hollow and meaningless compared to the love Linda had poured into her creations. January brought new challenges as Marcus faced the reality of returning to work. Their mortgage payment was now 3 months behind, and the utility companies had begun sending disconnect notices. He accepted a roofing job in Grand Rapids, 40 miles from Cedar Falls, because it was the only work available that paid enough to make a dent in their mounting debts. But finding affordable childcare proved nearly impossible on his limited budget. Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor, offered to watch Sophia after school for $20 a day, money Marcus could barely afford, but couldn't refuse. The arrangement lasted 2 weeks before Mrs. Patterson gently explained that Sophia's increasingly difficult behavior was beyond what she could handle. The 8-year-old had begun having explosive tantrums when Marcus left for work, screaming that he was going to die too and leave her completely alone. The school district offered an after-school program, but it cost $60 per week and required Marcus to pick Sophia up by 6 o'clock. With his construction sites frequently running late and the 40-mile commute, he missed pickup time 3 times in the first week, resulting in emergency childcare fees that cost more than the program itself. February marked 6 months since Linda's diagnosis and 3 months since her death. Marcus sat at their kitchen table one evening, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay and job offers he couldn't accept, feeling like he was drowning in responsibilities he had never learned to manage. Linda had handled their finances, maintained their social calendar, and somehow made their modest income stretch to cover everything they needed. Without her organizational skills and nursing salary, their carefully constructed life was collapsing piece by piece. Sophia's counselor at school recommended residential treatment for her increasingly severe emotional outbursts. The suggestion hit Marcus like a physical blow. His daughter needed professional help he couldn't afford, in a facility that would separate them when they had already lost so much. He spent that night researching options online, discovering that quality treatment programs cost thousands of dollars per month and often had waiting lists stretching into the following year. The breaking point came on a snowy Thursday in early March. Marcus had been working on a bathroom renovation project in Kalamazoo when he received a call from Sophia's school. She had locked herself in a supply closet during lunch and refused to come out, screaming that she wanted her mommy and threatening to hurt herself if anyone tried to open the door. The principal strongly suggested that Marcus come immediately to help manage the situation. By the time Marcus arrived, a school social worker had convinced Sophia to open the door, but she remained curled in a corner, rocking back and forth and whispering to herself. She looked so small and broken that Marcus felt his own composure shatter completely. This was his baby girl, the child Linda had trusted him to protect and nurture, and he was failing her in every way that mattered. Mr. Rodriguez, the social worker, said gently, "We need to discuss Sophia's safety. Her behavioral episodes are escalating, and she's mentioned wanting to go be with mommy several times today. We're required to report these concerning statements." Marcus understood the implications immediately. Child Protective Services would become involved, evaluating whether he was capable of providing adequate care for a grieving child with complex emotional needs. The foster care system that had shaped his own troubled childhood might now claim his daughter, completing the destruction of everything Linda had helped him build. That evening, Marcus called his father-in-law, Robert Brennan, hoping for guidance or support. The conversation went worse than he had expected. Robert, grief-stricken by his daughter's death and struggling with his own financial problems, suggested that Sophia might be better off living with relatives who could provide stability. "You're a good man, Marcus, but you're overwhelmed," Robert said with painful honesty. "Linda's sister Kate has been wanting to help. She and her husband have 2 kids Sophia's age, and they could afford the therapy she needs. Maybe it's time to consider what's best for Sophia, even if it's not what you want." The suggestion felt like a betrayal of everything Marcus had promised Linda. In her final weeks, she had made him swear repeatedly that he would keep Sophia close, that he would never let their daughter feel abandoned the way he had felt as a child. But as Marcus looked around their increasingly shabby house, at the stack of overdue bills on the counter and the empty refrigerator that would remain empty until his next paycheck, he wondered if love was enough when he couldn't provide basic security. March brought warmer weather, but no relief from the downward spiral consuming their lives. Marcus lost the Kalamazoo renovation job when he missed too many days. Dealing with Sophia's school crises, their mortgage company initiated foreclosure proceedings, and Marcus realized they would likely lose the house Linda had loved within 6 months. Sophia's teacher reported that she had fallen significantly behind academically, spending most school days in the counselor's office instead of learning with her classmates. The final blow came when Marcus discovered that their health insurance had lapsed due to missed premium payments. Sophia's asthma medication alone cost $200 per month without coverage, money he simply didn't have. He spent an entire day at the county health department, filling out forms for assistance programs while Sophia sat beside him, quietly, drawing pictures of their family with increasing frequency and decreasing accuracy. In her latest artwork, Mommy appeared as an angel floating above Marcus and Sophia, who stood alone in front of an empty house. By the end of March, Marcus Rodriguez found himself facing a reality he had never imagined possible. The man who had overcome a difficult childhood and built a loving family was about to lose everything that mattered: his home, his financial stability, and potentially his daughter. The construction skills that had once provided adequate income meant nothing when he couldn't leave Sophia alone long enough to work consistently. The community support that had sustained them immediately after Linda's death had gradually faded. As people returned to their own lives and responsibilities, sitting in their living room on a rainy evening, watching Sophia color in silence while children's television programs played unwatched in the background, Marcus faced the hardest question of his life. Was he being selfish by insisting on keeping Sophia with him when he couldn't provide the stability and resources she desperately needed? Linda had saved him from a life of isolation and rootlessness, but maybe saving Sophia meant making the most difficult sacrifice imaginable, letting her go to people who could give her what he couldn't. The irony cut deep. Marcus had spent his childhood longing for a family that would never give up on him, never send him away when things got difficult. Now he was contemplating doing exactly that to the most precious person in his world, the living reminder of Linda's love and faith in his capacity for growth. But keeping Sophia close felt increasingly like holding onto a life preserver while they both drowned, unable to save each other from the undertow of circumstances beyond their control. As Sophia finally fell asleep that night, Marcus stood in the doorway of her room, watching her small form beneath blankets Linda had chosen, surrounded by toys Linda had bought, in a house that would soon belong to someone else. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new impossible choices, and new evidence of his inadequacy as a single parent. He had hit bottom before and found a way to climb back up. But this felt different. This time, his failure wouldn't just hurt him, it would hurt the innocent child who deserved so much more than a father, who couldn't figure out how to hold their world together. The eviction notice arrived on a Friday afternoon, in early April, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who apologized for the intrusion while handing Marcus legal documents. That gave them 30 days to vacate the premises. Sophia was at school, thankfully, sparing her the sight of her father standing in their doorway holding papers that officially ended their life on Maple Street. Marcus read the notice 3 times before the words fully registered: 30 days, to find somewhere else to live with no money for deposits, no references from recent landlords, and a credit score destroyed by months of missed payments. That evening, Marcus called his supervisor at Henderson Construction to beg for advance payment on the kitchen renovation project he was scheduled to start Monday morning. The conversation didn't go as planned. Tom Henderson, who had been patient with Marcus's scheduling conflicts and frequent absences, delivered news that felt like another punch to an already battered man. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but I had to give the Morrison job to Danny's crew. I can't keep holding projects when I don't know if you'll show up. I understand what you're going through. I really do, but I've got a business to run." The Morrison kitchen renovation would have paid enough to catch up on their mortgage and buy them time to negotiate with the bank. Without it, Marcus faced the reality that his construction career in Cedar Falls was effectively over. Word traveled fast in the tight-knit contracting community, and his reputation for reliability, the foundation of any successful tradesman's livelihood, had been irreparably damaged by months of canceled jobs and incomplete commitments. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus answered the door to find Detective Ray Phillips, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who worked with the county's Child Protective Services Division. Sophia was in the backyard, attempting to revive Linda's neglected flower garden with a child's watering can, completely absorbed in her task. "Mr. Rodriguez, I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I wanted to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding Sophia's welfare." Marcus invited Detective Phillips inside, though every instinct screamed at him to slam the door and pretend this conversation wasn't happening. They sat at the kitchen table where Marcus had received so much devastating news over the past year. And Phillips opened a file folder with Sophia's name written in neat handwriting. Across the tab, "I want to be clear that no one is questioning your love for your daughter." Phillips began carefully, "But we've received reports from the school about escalating behavioral incidents, missed medical appointments, and some concerning statements Sophia has made about wanting to be with mommy, combined with your current housing situation. We need to ensure Sophia's safety and stability." The detective's tone was respectful but firm as he outlined the investigation process. A caseworker would visit their home within the next week to assess living conditions. Sophia would be interviewed by a child psychologist to evaluate her emotional state. Marcus would need to provide documentation of his income, childcare arrangements, and plans for their housing crisis. "What happens if you decide I'm not capable of caring for her?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "That's not our goal here," Phillips assured him. "We want to help you succeed as Sophia's father. But if we determine that her immediate safety is at risk, we may need to explore temporary placement with relatives while you address the current challenges." After Phillips left, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the business card the detective had left behind. The phone number for Child Protective Services seemed to mock him, a constant reminder that his greatest fear was becoming reality. He was failing Sophia, just as every adult in his own childhood had failed him. Despite his desperate promises to Linda that history wouldn't repeat itself, Sunday evening brought another surprise, a knock at the door long after Sophia's bedtime. Marcus opened it to find a woman he didn't recognize, probably in her early 40s, with graying brown hair and clothes that suggested she worked with her hands. She carried a manila envelope and wore an expression of nervous determination. "Mr. Rodriguez, my name is Jana Sullivan. I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I heard about your situation and wanted to talk to you about something important." Marcus invited her in, curious about this stranger who seemed to know details about his private struggles. Jana declined his offer of coffee but accepted a seat at the kitchen table. Placing her envelope carefully in front of her, "I should explain who I am," Jana began. "I work for the state's Department of Children and Family Services, but I'm here tonight as a private citizen, not in any official capacity. What I'm about to tell you could get me in serious trouble professionally, so I need your word that this conversation stays between us." Marcus nodded, intrigued despite his exhaustion. "There's a family situation I've been working on for the past 8 months, Jana continued. "A grandmother named Ruth Kowalski, who was caring for 7 children, her daughter's 6 kids plus 1 grandchild. The daughter died from a drug overdose last summer, and Ruth has been struggling to keep the family together ever since." Jana opened her envelope and spread out photographs of children, ranging in age from 3 to 15. Their faces showed the kind of weariness that comes from instability and loss. But there was something else there too, a fierce loyalty to each other that Marcus recognized from his own foster care experiences. "Ruth is 71 years old and has diabetes that's getting worse every month," Jana explained. "She loves these kids desperately, but she can't provide what they need anymore. The house is falling apart, there's never enough food, and the older kids are missing school to help care for the younger ones." Marcus studied the photographs, wondering why the social worker was sharing confidential information with a complete stranger. "I don't understand why you're telling me this." Jana took a deep breath before continuing, "Because in 3 days, those children are going to be removed from Ruth's care and split up among different foster homes across the state. The older ones will probably age out of the system before they graduate high school. The younger ones will bounce between placements until they either get adopted or turn 18. They'll never see each other again." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He knew exactly what Jana was describing because he had lived it himself. The devastating separation from the only family you'd ever known, the desperate hope that somehow you'd be reunited, and the gradual realization that the system wasn't designed to keep families together. "There's no family member who can take them?" Marcus asked. "Ruth was their last option. Both parents are dead, and there are no relatives willing or able to care for 7 children. The state's preference is always family placement, but when that's not possible..." Jana shrugged helplessly. Marcus still didn't understand why Jana was involving him in this heartbreaking situation. "What does this have to do with me and Sophia?" Jana leaned forward, her expression intense. "Your wife Linda volunteered with our department for 2 years before she got sick. She helped with emergency placements, mentored foster families, and advocated for keeping siblings together whenever possible. She talked about you constantly, how you had overcome your own difficult childhood and built a stable life despite the odds." The mention of Linda's volunteer work surprised Marcus. She had mentioned helping with children's services occasionally, but he hadn't realized the depth of her involvement or that she had discussed their personal life with colleagues. Linda believed that people who had survived the foster care system themselves often made the best advocates for children in similar situations. Jana continued, "She said you understood what it meant to be abandoned by adults who were supposed to protect you." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, as Jeanette's words brought back memories he usually kept buried. "I'm not exactly a success story right now. I can barely take care of my own daughter." "That's exactly why I'm here," Jana said urgently. "Ruth Kowalski's house is paid off. She inherited it from her parents 20 years ago, and there's no mortgage. It's a big old Victorian on the east side of town with 6 bedrooms and a bathrooms. Ruth wants to deed the house to whoever will keep the children together, instead of letting them be separated." The proposition was so unexpected that Marcus couldn't immediately process it. "She wants to give her house to a stranger. She wants to give her house to someone who will preserve her grandchildren as a family," Jana corrected. "Ruth grew up in foster care herself during the Depression. She knows what separation does to children, and she'd rather lose her home than watch these kids disappear into the system." Jana pulled out a folder containing documents Marcus couldn't quite understand. Property assessments, legal papers, and what appeared to be a preliminary custody agreement. "There are conditions, of course. You'd have to formally adopt all 7 children. You'd have to maintain the house and keep the family together until the youngest turns 18. And you'd have to do it without any significant financial support from the state, beyond basic foster care payments." The proposal seemed simultaneously impossible and perfectly logical. Marcus had no experience raising 7 children, no stable income to support such a large family, and his own daughter was struggling with emotional problems that required professional attention. But he also understood, perhaps better than anyone, what it meant to watch a family be destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. "Why me specifically?" Marcus asked. "There must be other families looking to adopt." Jeanette's expression grew somber. "Not families willing to take 7 children at once. Most people want babies or young children without behavioral issues. These kids have been through trauma, they act out, they have trust issues, and they come as a package deal. Ruth has been trying to find a suitable family for months, but everyone gets scared off when they realize what they'd be taking on." Marcus thought about Sophia sleeping upstairs, about the eviction notice on his kitchen counter, about Detective Phillips and the looming threat of losing the only family he had left. Then he thought about 7 children facing the same separation and instability that had defined his own childhood. "I need to think about this," Marcus said finally, "and I need to meet these children before I could even consider such a decision." Jana nodded, gathering her papers back into the envelope. "Ruth would welcome a visit, but you should know that time is running out. The removal order goes into effect Wednesday morning. If you're seriously interested, we'd need to move quickly to halt the process." After Jana left, Marcus sat alone in his quiet house, staring at the business card she had left behind. Ruth Kowalski's address was written on the back in Jeanette's careful handwriting, along with a phone number and the words, "Please call tomorrow." The situation seemed surreal. 3 days ago, he had been contemplating giving up custody of his own daughter because he couldn't provide adequate care. Now a complete stranger was offering him the opportunity to become responsible for 7 additional children, along with a house large enough to accommodate them all. Marcus climbed the stairs to check on Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully surrounded by the stuffed animals Linda had collected for her over the years. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked younger than her 8 years, vulnerable and trusting in a way that broke Marcus's heart. How could he even consider taking on such an enormous responsibility when he was already failing. The one child he was supposed to protect, but as he stood in Sophia's doorway, Marcus remembered something Linda had said during one of their last conversations. She had been weak from chemotherapy, but determined to finish organizing Sophia's baby photos into albums. "The best gift we can give Sophia isn't a perfect life," Linda had whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's teaching her that families can be built in lots of different ways, and that love is something you choose to give, not something you earn." At the time, Marcus had thought she was talking about their unconventional beginning, the foster kid who found love with the nurse who saved him. But now, facing an impossible decision that could change multiple lives forever, he wondered if Linda had somehow known that their family story wasn't finished yet. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Marcus's mood as he drove through an unfamiliar part of Cedar Falls with Sophia strapped into her booster seat. He had spent Sunday night researching the Kowalski family online, finding scattered references to Ruth's late daughter Amanda in police reports and obituaries that painted a tragic picture of addiction and lost potential. The children's names appeared in court documents related to custody hearings: Ethan, Maya, twins Connor and Caleb, Lily, baby Marcus named ironically after his own grandfather, and Ruth's biological grandson Tyler from another daughter who had died in a car accident years earlier. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Sophia asked as they turned onto Elm Street, a neighborhood of older homes that had seen better decades. "We're going to meet some people who might become part of our family," Marcus replied, still struggling to believe his own words. Ruth Kowalski's house stood out even on a street of neglected properties. The Victorian's paint was peeling, gutters sagged under the weight of accumulated debris, and the front porch steps had settled unevenly, creating a noticeable slant. But the bones of the structure were solid, and Marcus's trained eye could see the potential beneath years of deferred maintenance. More importantly, it was enormous, easily 4 times the size of their current home on Maple Street. Ruth answered the door before Marcus could knock, as if she had been watching from the window. She was smaller than he had expected, probably no more than 5 feet tall, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and clothes that suggested she did her own housework despite her age. Her face showed the strain of recent months, but her handshake was firm and her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had survived countless challenges. "You must be Marcus," she said warmly, "and this beautiful girl must be Sophia. Come in. Come in. The children are eager to meet you." The inside of the house told a story of organized chaos. Toys were scattered across hardwood floors that gleamed despite their age. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator and most available wall space, and the aroma of fresh bread mixed with the distinct smell of too many people living into little space. But it felt like a home, not just a place where people slept and ate. The 7 Kowalski children were ranged in the living room with the careful positioning of kids who had been coached on making good impressions. 15-year-old Ethan stood near the fireplace, his defensive posture suggesting he was skeptical of any adult who promised to help. 13-year-old Maya sat cross-legged on the floor, holding 3-year-old baby Marcus while keeping a protective eye on 5-year-old Lily, who clutched a stuffed elephant with one ear missing. The 9-year-old twins, Connor and Caleb, flanked 11-year-old Tyler on the couch, all 3 boys wearing expressions that ranged from curious to wary. These children had learned early that adults often made promises they couldn't keep, and their body language suggested they were prepared for disappointment. "Kids, this is Mr. Rodriguez and his daughter Sophia," Ruth announced. "They're here because they're thinking about helping our family stay together." The necks are passed in a careful dance of introduction and assessment. Sophia, initially shy, gradually warmed to Lily and baby Marcus, sharing her crayons and helping them color pictures of houses and families. The older children peppered Marcus with questions that revealed both intelligence and premature maturity. Where would they go to school? Would they have to change their names? Could they keep their pets to cats and a goldfish named Bubbles? Marcus found himself most intrigued by Ethan, whose questions were the sharpest and most practical. "How do you know you won't just give up when things get hard?" the teenager asked bluntly. "Adults always say they want to help, but they usually change their minds once they figure out how much work we are. The honesty in Ethan's question hit Marcus harder than he expected. I don't know that I won't, he answered truthfully. But I do know what it feels like to have adults give up on you. And I wouldn't want any of you to experience that if I could prevent it. Ruth led Marcus on a tour of the house. While the children entertained Sophia in the living room, the Victorian had clearly been magnificent in its heyday, with high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and architectural details that spoke of craftsmanship from another era. 6 bedrooms on the second floor provided adequate space for a large family, though most needed significant updates to plumbing and electrical systems. Amanda grew up in this house, Ruth said as they stood in what had been her daughter's childhood bedroom. I kept hoping she'd bring the children here for good, that we could be a real family again. But addiction is a powerful enemy, and I couldn't compete with what the drugs offered her. The basement revealed Marcus's biggest concern, a furnace that looked older than Ruth herself, water stains on the foundation walls that suggested drainage problems, and electrical wiring that definitely wasn't up to current codes. The house was structurally sound, but would require thousands of dollars in repairs to meet safety standards for 8 children. I know it needs work, Ruth said, following his gaze to the antiquated electrical panel. I've got about $15,000 in savings that I've been holding for emergencies. It's yours if you take the children, along with the house. Back in the living room, Marcus observed the family dynamics that had developed over months of uncertainty. Maya had clearly assumed a maternal role despite being only 13, helping Lily with her shoes and reminding the twins to use inside. Voices, Tyler, despite being younger than Maya, seemed to serve as the family's emotional barometer, quickly identifying when tensions rose and distracting younger children with games or stories. Ethan maintained his position as protector and skeptic, watching Marcus's every interaction with his siblings for signs of impatience or frustration. When baby Marcus had a diaper blowout that required complete clothing changes, Ethan observed carefully to see how the potential new father would react to unglamorous parenting realities. Why don't you tell Mr. Rodriguez about your school situation? Ruth suggested to Ethan during a quiet moment. The teenager's expression tightened. I'm supposed to graduate next year, but I've missed a lot of school helping take care of everyone. My grades aren't great, and I don't know if I'll have enough credits. He paused, then added with forced casualness. I was thinking about dropping out anyway to get a job and help with expenses. Marcus recognized the sacrifice being contemplated. A bright kid willing to forfeit his education to support his family. What subjects do you like best? He asked. Math and science. I'm good with computers too. Ethan's defensive posture softened slightly. I built the computer we use from spare parts, one found at the recycling center. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus began to see how the children had adapted to their circumstances with remarkable resilience. They shared toys without fighting, cleaned up after themselves automatically, and demonstrated the kind of cooperation that comes from necessity rather than instruction. But he also noticed signs of stress. Maya's nervous habit of chewing her fingernails, Tyler's stutter when discussing their future, and the way all the children immediately stopped talking when Ruth mentioned the removal scheduled for Wednesday. Sophia, meanwhile, had found her place in the temporary family structure. With surprising ease, she helped Lily build towers with blocks, showed Connor and Caleb how to make paper airplanes, and seemed completely comfortable holding baby Marcus while Maya prepared his bottle. For the first time since Linda's death, Sophia appeared relaxed and genuinely happy. During a private conversation in the kitchen, Ruth shared details about the children's backgrounds that explained their maturity and interdependence. Amanda was in and out of their lives from the beginning. She explained while preparing sandwiches for lunch. The older ones learned to take care of the younger ones because they couldn't depend on their mother being functional. When she died, they were sad but not surprised. They'd been grieving her absence for years. Ruth's own health challenges added urgency to the situation. Her diabetes required careful monitoring, and she had recently been hospitalized twice for episodes related to her blood sugar. I love these children more than my own life, she said simply. But I'm 71 years old and I'm tired. They deserve someone who can give them energy and hope for the future. The practical aspects of Ruth's proposal became clearer as the day progressed. The house would be transferred to Marcus outright, along with Ruth's savings and some basic furniture. She would move to a senior living facility across town, where her medical needs could be monitored more carefully. The children would need to be formally adopted through the state system, but Jana Sullivan had indicated she could expedite the process given the unusual circumstances. "What about your construction business?" Ruth asked as they sat on the front porch while the children played in the backyard. "Could you work from here?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing. The house's detached garage could potentially be converted into a workshop for smaller projects, and the basement offered storage space for tools and materials. But supporting a family of 8 would require steady income on a scale he had never achieved as an independent contractor. "I might need to look for something more stable," he admitted. "Regular employment with benefits, even if it means working for someone else instead of running my own business." That evening, back at their house on Maple Street, Marcus and Sophia sat at their kitchen table with takeout pizza and a decision that would change their lives forever. Sophia had talked non-stop during the drive home about her new potential siblings, especially baby Marcus and shy Lily, who had warmed to her immediately. "Are we really going to live with them, Daddy?" Sophia asked between bites of pizza. "Would you like that?" Marcus replied, though her enthusiasm had already answered his question. "Yes. It would be like having the biggest family ever. And baby Marcus needs someone to teach him things. And Lily said I could help her learn to read better." Sophia paused thoughtfully. "Do you think Mommy would like them?" The question brought unexpected tears to Marcus's eyes. Linda had always dreamed of having more children, though her cancer diagnosis had made that impossible. "I think Mommy would love them," he said honestly. She always said families could be built in different ways. Tuesday morning brought a flurry of phone calls as Marcus began the process of halting the children's removal. Jana Sullivan worked frantically to file emergency motions with the family court, while Marcus contacted lawyers, social workers, and anyone else who might expedite the legal process. Detective Phillips, surprisingly, became an ally once he understood the proposal, arguing that keeping Sophia with her father while adding stable siblings to her environment might actually improve her emotional well-being. The biggest challenge came from the state's bureaucracy, which wasn't designed to handle such unusual arrangements quickly. Emergency adoptions typically took months to process, even in ideal circumstances. But Ruth's age and medical condition, combined with the imminent separation of the children, created a crisis that demanded immediate solutions. By Tuesday evening, a preliminary agreement had been reached. Marcus would take temporary custody of all 7 children while the formal adoption process proceeded. Ruth would deed the house to him immediately, and the children's removal would be postponed indefinitely pending completion of home studies and background checks. As Marcus packed Sophia's belongings that night, he reflected on the surreal turn his life had taken. 3 days ago, he had been facing eviction and the possible loss of his daughter. Now he was preparing to become responsible for 8 children and a house that needed extensive repairs. The logical part of his mind insisted he was making a terrible mistake, taking on far more than any reasonable person could handle. But another part of him, the part that remembered what it felt like to be a child nobody wanted, recognized this as the opportunity Linda had always believed would come. She had taught him that love multiplied rather than divided when shared, and that the families worth having were often the ones that seemed impossible from the outside. Wednesday morning, Marcus Rodriguez loaded his daughter's belongings into his pickup truck and drove across town to begin the most challenging and potentially rewarding chapter of his life. The first 3 weeks in the Kowalski house tested every assumption Marcus had made about parenting, family dynamics, and his own capacity for patience. What had seemed like organized chaos during his visit quickly revealed itself as barely controlled pandemonium when he became responsible for managing it 24 hours a day. 8 children created exponentially more complexity than simple mathematics suggested. Every meal required strategic planning. Every morning involved orchestrating departures to 3 different schools. and bedtime resembled a military operation that frequently ended in defeat. The house's quirks became apparent immediately. The upstairs plumbing worked sporadically, meaning morning showers required careful scheduling to avoid leaving half the family with cold water. The ancient furnace had mood swings that seemed to correspond with outdoor temperature changes, running constantly on mild days and shutting down completely when actually needed. Most challenging was the electrical system, which couldn't handle more than 2 major appliances running simultaneously without tripping. Breakers that were located in an unmarked basement panel. Marcus threw himself into repairs with the desperation of a man who had no choice but to succeed. He rewired the kitchen during early morning hours before the children woke up, replaced corroded plumbing fixtures during their school hours, and spent evenings researching heating system repairs on library computers since their internet connection was intermittent at best. Ruth's $15,000 disappeared quickly. Emergency furnace repairs cost $4,000. Electrical upgrades consumed another $6,000. And basic safety improvements, like smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms, required constant reinvestment. The children's adjustment to their new living situation proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. Ethan, true to his role as family protector, tested Marcus constantly with increasingly bold challenges to his authority. The teenager stayed out past curfew without explanation, refused to help with household chores, and openly questioned Marcus's decisions in front of younger siblings. When Marcus attempted to ground him, Ethan responded by threatening to run away and take his siblings with him. "You can't make us stay here," Ethan declared during a particularly heated confrontation in early May. "We survived without you before, and we can do it again. You're not our father, and you never will be." The words stung because they contained enough truth to hurt. Marcus wasn't their father, and his authority existed only because the state had granted it temporarily while permanent arrangements were sorted out. The adoption process crawled forward with bureaucratic slowness, requiring home visits, background checks, psychological evaluations, and mountains of paperwork that seemed to multiply faster than he could complete them. Maya's adjustment took a different form. She became clingy and anxious, constantly seeking reassurance that Marcus wouldn't change his mind about keeping them. The 13-year-old had assumed maternal responsibilities for so long that relinquishing them to an adult felt dangerous and unnatural. She checked on younger children throughout the night, hoarded food in her bedroom despite having full access to the kitchen, and broke down in tears whenever Marcus had to leave the house for any reason. "What if you don't come back?" she asked repeatedly. "What if you decide we're too much trouble and just drive away?" The twins, Connor and Caleb, channeled their stress into increasingly destructive behavior. They broke Ruth's antique china while playing indoor baseball, flooded the downstairs bathroom during an unsupervised science experiment, and somehow managed to get green paint on the living room ceiling in a manner that defied both physics and explanation. When Marcus attempted to discipline them, they claimed they couldn't remember which twin had committed which offense, making consequences impossible to assign fairly. Tyler's stutter worsened significantly during the transition, especially when discussing anything related to permanence or the future. The 11-year-old had been the family's emotional caretaker for so long that he struggled to trust that Marcus could handle crises without falling apart. Every minor emergency, Sophia's scraped knee, baby Marcus's fever, Lily's nightmare, sent Tyler into protective mode, frantically trying to solve problems before the new father noticed them. Baby Marcus, now 15 months old, required constant supervision as he entered the toddler phase with enthusiasm and no sense of self-preservation. The Victorian house, designed in an era when child safety wasn't a primary concern, contained countless hazards for a mobile toddler. Marcus spent a fortune on safety gates, outlet covers, and cabinet locks, only to discover that baby Marcus possessed an uncanny ability to defeat even the most sophisticated child-proofing measures. 5-year-old Lily's adjustment seemed the smoothest initially, but her apparent resilience masked deeper struggles. She began having nightmares about her grandmother Ruth disappearing like her mother had, and she developed an intense attachment to Marcus that manifested as separation anxiety. Whenever he left her sight, Lily would hide under his bed when it was time for school, claiming stomach aches that miraculously disappeared when he agreed to let her stay home. Sophia, meanwhile, thrived in ways that surprised everyone, including Marcus. Having siblings around constantly provided the social stimulation she had been missing since Linda's death, and taking care of younger children seemed to give her a sense of purpose that individual therapy hadn't achieved. But her happiness also highlighted how much she had been struggling in their two-person household, making Marcus question whether his fierce determination to keep her close had actually been hurting her development. The first major crisis came 6 weeks after they moved in, when Ethan was caught shoplifting at the local grocery store. The teenager had stolen basic necessities, deodorant, shampoo, and school supplies, items that Marcus would have purchased without question if asked. But Ethan's explanation revealed the depth of his mistrust and the survival instincts developed during years of uncertainty. "I don't know how long you're going to keep us," Ethan said during the drive home from the police station. "What happens when you get tired of spending money on kids who aren't really yours? I was just making sure we had what we needed." The incident forced Marcus to confront how his own approach to the children had been shaped by his desperation to prove himself worthy of keeping them. He had been so focused on providing basic necessities and maintaining order that he had failed to address their deeper need for security and belonging. These children didn't need another temporary caretaker. They needed someone who could convince them that this placement was different from all the others. Marcus began making changes to demonstrate permanence rather than just talking about it. He enrolled Ethan in summer school to help him catch up on missing credits. Despite the additional expense, he hung family photos throughout the house, including pictures that incorporated all 8 children rather than treating them as separate units. Most importantly, he started including the older children in decisions about house repairs, budgeting, and family rules, treating them as stakeholders rather than recipients of his charity. The financial pressure remained relentless. Supporting 8 children required resources Marcus had never imagined needing. Grocery bills alone consumed nearly half his income, and clothing 8 rapidly growing bodies seemed to require constant trips to thrift stores and discount retailers. When the house's hot water heater died in early June, Marcus faced a choice between paying for replacement or covering the registration fees for the children's summer activities. He chose the hot water heater, explaining to disappointed children that cold showers were temporary, while missed opportunities for normalcy might have longer-lasting effects. The decision sparked his first serious argument with Maya, who accused him of caring more about the house than their happiness. "You said we were going to be a real family," she shouted through tears of frustration. "Real families don't make kids give up everything they want just because money is tight." Her words forced Marcus to recognize how his own childhood experiences with poverty had shaped his priorities in ways that weren't necessarily helpful for children who had different needs and expectations. These kids had experienced material deprivation, but they had also experienced stability with Ruth, even if that stability had been threatened by her age and health. The breakthrough came during an unexpected emergency in late June. Baby Marcus developed a high fever that spiked to 100 degrees during the night, requiring an immediate trip to the emergency room. As Marcus prepared to leave with the sick toddler, he faced a dilemma: 7 other children who couldn't be left alone, but couldn't all fit in his truck for the hospital trip. Without prompting, Ethan stepped forward. "I'll stay with everyone until you get back. Maya can help me get the little kids ready for school if you're not home by morning." The trust implicit in Ethan's offer, and Marcus's acceptance of it, marked a turning point in their relationship. For the first time, the teenager was being treated as a partner in the family's welfare rather than a potential problem to be managed. When Marcus returned from the hospital 6 hours later with a much improved baby Marcus, he found the house running smoothly under Ethan's supervision. "How did everything go?" Marcus asked, exhausted from the night's stress. "Fine," Ethan replied, but there was pride in his voice. "We're a team, right? That's what teams do. They cover for each other." The summer brought new challenges as Marcus struggled to balance work opportunities with childcare responsibilities. Construction jobs during prime building season could have provided much-needed income, but they also required long hours away from home. Several potential clients withdrew their offers when they realized Marcus couldn't work late or travel to distant job sites because of his family obligations. The solution came from an unexpected source: the children themselves. Tyler, whose computer skills rivaled Ethan's, suggested that Marcus advertise for smaller residential jobs that could be completed during school hours. Maya proposed a neighborhood babysitting service to bring in extra income during summer months. Even the younger children contributed ideas for cost-saving measures and ways to generate small amounts of money. By late July, the Rodriguez household had developed its own economy and management structure. Ethan handled major household maintenance under Marcus's supervision, learning valuable skills while earning small payments for his work. Maya coordinated child care schedules and managed grocery shopping with military precision. Tyler maintained their newly established website advertising Marcus's handyman services. The younger children contributed through age-appropriate chores that taught responsibility while lightening the overall household workload. But the most significant test came when Jana Sullivan visited for a routine check-in and discovered that the formal adoption proceedings had stalled due to bureaucratic complications. A clerical error had invalidated several months of paperwork, and the process would need to restart from the beginning. Worse, a new social worker assigned to the case was questioning whether any single parent could adequately care for 8 children, regardless of the circumstances. There's a possibility that the state might decide to proceed with the original plan to separate the children, Jana warned during a private conversation with Marcus. The new caseworker thinks placing them in smaller groups with different families might be more manageable. The news hit the household like a bomb. Ethan immediately began researching legal options for fighting the state's decision, while Maya started packing belongings as if separation was inevitable. The younger children sensed the adults' tension and began exhibiting stress behaviors that had largely disappeared during the summer. Marcus faced the fight of his life, not just for his own family's survival, but for the principle that love and commitment mattered more than conventional definitions of appropriate family size. He would need to prove that their unconventional household wasn't just surviving but thriving. Despite the challenges that continued to test them daily, the battle for their family's future was about to begin in earnest, and Marcus knew that everything they had built together during the summer would be scrutinized by people who had never experienced the transformative power of their chosen family. The stakes couldn't be higher. 7 children's futures and his own redemption hung in the balance. August brought news that would have devastated Marcus 6 months earlier, but now only strengthened his resolve. The new caseworker, Patricia Mullins, arrived for her evaluation with a clipboard full of concerns and a predetermined conclusion that no single parent could adequately manage 8 children. She spent 3 hours documenting every scuff mark on the walls, every toy left out of place, and every sign that the Rodriguez household didn't conform to traditional family structures. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said as she prepared to leave, "I admire what you're trying to do, but my responsibility is to these children's welfare, not your good intentions. 8 children need more resources than any one person can provide." Marcus had learned enough about bureaucracy over the past months to recognize when official minds were already made up. Instead of arguing with Mullins, he focused on documenting everything that was working in their household. Ethan helped him create detailed schedules showing how each child's needs were met. Educational progress was tracked and medical care was coordinated. Maya contributed budget spreadsheets demonstrating that their finances, while tight, were stable and improving. The real transformation became evident during the county fair in late August when Marcus decided to enter a float in the family parade despite having no experience with such things. The project became a whole family endeavor that revealed how much their dynamics had changed. Since the chaotic early weeks, Ethan designed and built the float's structure using skills learned during house repairs. Maya coordinated costumes and decorations with the efficiency of a professional event planner. Tyler handled promotional materials and social media, while the younger children contributed artwork and enthusiasm. Their float, Themed families come in all sizes. Featured all 8 children wearing matching t-shirts that read Rodriguez family. Population 8 with individual photos and birth dates. Marcus walked beside the float wearing a shirt that said World's Luckiest Dad, a title that 6 months earlier would have felt like a cruel joke, but now represented hard-earned truth. The community's reaction surprised everyone, including Marcus. Instead of the skeptical curiosity he had expected, they received enthusiastic applause and support from spectators who had watched their unconventional family navigate the challenges of the past months. Several local business owners approached Marcus after the parade, offering employment opportunities that would accommodate his family responsibilities. The most significant offer came from Frank Patterson, owner of Patterson Custom Homes, who had been observing Marcus's renovation work on the Victorian house. "I've been looking for someone to head my residential repair division," Patterson explained. "The work is steady, the pay is good, and you'd have the flexibility to handle family emergencies. Plus, I could use someone who understands that homes are about more than just structures. They're about creating space for families to grow." The job offer represented everything Marcus had hoped to find: stable income, benefits for the children, and work that utilized his construction skills, without requiring him to rebuild his independent business from scratch. But accepting it meant acknowledging that his dreams of entrepreneurial success were less important than providing security for his family. September brought the start of a new school year and Marcus's first opportunity to see how well the children had integrated into their community. Parent-teacher conferences revealed academic progress that exceeded everyone's expectations. Ethan was not only on track to graduate, but had been accepted into the district's advanced computer programming course. Maya had volunteered to tutor younger students in math, finding confidence through helping others succeed. The twins had channeled their creative energy into the school's robotics club, where their unconventional problem-solving approaches were viewed as assets rather than disruptions. Tyler's stutter had improved dramatically as his confidence grew, and he had been selected for the debate team, despite being younger than most participants. Even 5-year-old Lily was thriving in kindergarten, displaying leadership qualities that her teacher attributed to having learned responsibility. Through caring for younger siblings, Sophia's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The withdrawn, angry child who had hidden in supply closets the previous spring was now a confident second grader who served as an informal ambassador for her large family. When classmates asked about having so many siblings, Sophia explained matter-of-factly that families could be built in different ways, and that love was what made them real. The true test of their family's foundation came in October when baby Marcus, now 18 months old, was hospitalized with pneumonia. The crisis could have shattered their carefully constructed routines, but instead it demonstrated how thoroughly the children had internalized their roles as partners. In family management, Ethan automatically assumed responsibility for coordinating younger children's schedules. While Marcus stayed at the hospital, Maya organized meal preparation and ensured homework was completed despite the disruption. Tyler managed communications with schools and relatives, while Sophia helped keep Lily calm and distracted from worry about her little brother. When Marcus returned home after 3 days at the hospital with a recovered toddler, he found the household running more smoothly than some 2-parent families managed under normal circumstances. More importantly, he found 7 children who had proven to themselves that they could handle crisis without falling apart, a confidence that would serve them well in future challenges. The bureaucratic threat that had loomed over them all summer finally came to a head in November when Patricia Mullins filed her recommendation that the children be placed in smaller family units for their own welfare. The hearing was scheduled for early December, giving Marcus less than a month to prepare a defense of their unconventional family structure. The preparation process revealed how much the community had come to support the Rodriguez family. Pastor Williams from their church offered to testify about the children's positive involvement in youth programs. Teachers volunteered to speak about academic and social progress. Even neighbors who had initially been skeptical about 8 children moving into their quiet residential area now spoke enthusiastically about the family's positive impact on the community. Most surprisingly, Dr. Patricia Henley, the oncologist, who had delivered Linda's terminal diagnosis, reached out to offer support. She had heard about Marcus's situation through the hospital's social worker network and wanted to provide testimony about his character and commitment. "Your wife talked about you constantly during her treatments," Dr. Henley told Marcus during their meeting. "She was convinced that you had the capacity to create a family wherever you went, not because you sought it out, but because you understood what it meant to need belonging. Watching what you've accomplished with these children proves she was right." The hearing itself took place on a snowy Tuesday morning in early December, with all 8 children present as Marcus had requested. Patricia Mullins presented her case with clinical precision, citing statistics about single-parent households, financial stress indicators, and optimal child-to-caregiver ratios. Her argument was logical, well-researched, and completely disconnected from the reality of the family she was attempting to dissolve. Marcus's response was personal rather than statistical. He spoke about Ethan's transformation from angry protector to confident young man. Preparing for college, he described Maya's evolution from overwhelmed pseudo-parent to nurturing older sister, who still helped younger children, but no longer carried adult responsibilities alone. He highlighted Tyler's growing confidence, the twins' channeled creativity, Lily's security, baby Marcus's healthy development, and Sophia's renewed joy in life. But the most powerful testimony came from the children themselves when Judge Margaret Foster asked Ethan what he wanted for his family's future. The 17-year-old spoke with the eloquence of someone who had learned that words could be as powerful as defiance. "We've been through a lot of placements and a lot of adults who said they wanted to help," Ethan said clearly. "Marcus is the first one who didn't try to change us or split us up or make us grateful for scraps. He treats us like we're worth the trouble we cause, and he's taught us that being a family means choosing each other every day, not just when it's easy." Maya's testimony focused on security and stability. "Before Marcus, I was always afraid that something would happen to separate us. Now I know that even when hard things happen, and they do happen, we handle them together. That's what families do." Tyler, speaking without a stutter for the first time in months, addressed the judge directly. "The state thinks we need different families, but we already are a family. Marcus didn't make us one. We were always a family. He just gave us a place where being a family was allowed." The younger children's contributions were simpler but equally compelling. Connor and Caleb explained that they felt safer knowing all their siblings were in the same house. Lily drew a picture of their family that included everyone, including Ruth, who visited weekly, and Linda, who appeared as an angel watching over them. Sophia spoke about how having siblings had taught her that being sad about mommy didn't mean she couldn't be happy about other things too. When baby Marcus toddled over to Marcus during the proceedings and climbed into his lap, calling him daddy, in his developing vocabulary, even Patricia Mullins seemed to recognize that some bonds transcended bureaucratic categories. Judge Foster's decision was delivered after a brief recess that felt eternal to everyone involved. "This case presents an unusual situation that requires looking beyond conventional wisdom about family structures," she began. "The evidence shows a household that is not only functioning, but thriving under circumstances that would challenge many traditional families." She continued, "These children have experienced stability, academic progress, emotional growth, and most importantly, the security of knowing they belong together. The court finds no compelling reason to disrupt a family unit that is clearly succeeding, regardless of how unconventional it might appear." The formal adoption was finalized on a Friday afternoon in early January, exactly 9 months after Marcus had first met the Kowalski children. The courthouse ceremony was attended by extended family, friends from church, neighbors, and several teachers who had watched the children flourish. Ruth, now settled comfortably in her assisted living facility, served as an honorary grandmother, beaming with pride as Marcus officially became the legal father of 7 children, who had already claimed him as their own. The celebration afterward, held at the renovated Victorian house, showcased how completely their lives had been transformed. The house itself bore little resemblance to the neglected property Marcus had first visited. fresh paint-covered walls that now displayed family photos, artwork, and achievements. The electrical and plumbing systems worked reliably. The furnace maintained consistent temperatures, and safety improvements ensured that even baby Marcus could explore freely. More importantly, the house had become a true home, where 8 children felt secure enough to pursue individual interests while maintaining strong family bonds. Ethan was dual-enrolled in community college courses while finishing high school, already planning for a future in computer engineering. Maya had started a neighborhood babysitting cooperative that provided income while teaching younger children from other families. Tyler had discovered a talent for writing and was working on a book about sibling relationships. The transformation extended beyond their household to the broader community. Other families facing crisis situations began reaching out to Marcus for advice and support, recognizing him as someone who understood both the challenges of unconventional family structures and the resources needed to make them successful. When Frank Patterson offered Marcus a partnership in expanding the company's family-friendly employment practices, it represented recognition that the Rodriguez family's success had broader implications for how society supported diverse family structures. As January turned to February, exactly 1 year after Linda's death had left Marcus convinced he was failing as a father to 1 child. He now managed 8 children with confidence and joy he hadn't known was possible. The man who had once believed he was better off alone had become the center of a family that proved love could multiply infinitely when shared freely. 2 years after the adoption was finalized, Marcus Rodriguez stood before the Cedar Falls City Council on a warm Tuesday evening in June, holding a folder of documents that represented something unprecedented in the town's history. The council chambers were packed beyond capacity, with families, social workers, educators, and community leaders who had come to witness the presentation of what would become known as the Rodriguez Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to keep sibling groups together in foster care and adoption. The idea had emerged organically from Marcus's experience, but its formal development came through his partnership with Jana Sullivan, who had been promoted to Director of Family Services for the county. Together, they had spent months researching successful family preservation programs, interviewing other large adoptive families, and developing strategies that could be replicated across different communities. 3 years ago, 7 children faced separation through no fault of their own. Marcus began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Tonight, I want to talk about what happened when one community decided that keeping families together was worth fighting for, and how that decision changed not just 8 lives, but hundreds of others. The Rodriguez family story had indeed rippled far beyond their Victorian house on Elm Street. Their success had inspired policy changes at the state level, encouraging social workers to seek creative solutions for sibling groups rather than defaulting to separation. The financial model they had developed, combining adoption subsidies, home ownership assistance, and community support networks, was being piloted in 6 other Michigan counties. But the most profound changes were visible in the individual lives that had been touched by their example. In the audience sat 3 other families who had followed the Rodriguez model, taking in sibling groups that traditional placements couldn't accommodate. The Martinez family had adopted 4 siblings from Detroit. The Johnson family, inspired by Marcus's story, had provided respite care for multiple families in crisis while pursuing formal adoption of twin brothers. The Chen family had converted their basement into additional bedrooms to accommodate 5 siblings, whose grandmother could no longer care for them. Ethan Rodriguez, now 19 and a sophomore at Michigan State University studying computer science, had returned home for the presentation. His scholarship had been funded by a program specifically designed for former foster children who had maintained family connections, recognizing that academic success often correlated with family stability. But more importantly, Ethan had become a mentor for other teenagers in the foster care system, speaking at high schools about the possibility of aging out with family support. Rather than facing adulthood alone, when I was 15, I thought I was responsible for keeping my siblings safe all by myself, Ethan told the council during the public comment period. Marcus didn't just take us in. He taught me that being part of a family means sharing responsibility, not carrying it alone. That's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. Maya, now 16 and junior class president at Cedar Falls High School, had channeled her natural leadership abilities into founding the school's first peer mentoring program for students from non-traditional family structures. The program paired students from divorced homes, blended families, kinship care, and adoptive families with others who shared similar experiences. Reducing isolation and building support networks, her academic achievements had earned recognition from the state's Department of Education. But Maya was most proud of the families she had helped connect through her volunteer work. With John S. Sullivan's office, she regularly spoke to prospective adoptive parents about the realities of taking in older children, helping prepare them for challenges while emphasizing the rewards of expanding their families. People always ask me if I'm grateful to Marcus for adopting us, Maya had told a recent gathering of social workers. But gratitude implies that someone did something they didn't have to do. Marcus became our father because that's who he is. Someone who sees family as a choice you make every day, not just a legal document you sign once. Tyler, now 14 and an honor roll student, had overcome his speech challenges completely and discovered a talent for public speaking that regularly amazed audiences. He had testified before the state legislature about the importance of keeping siblings together. His articulate presentation helping secure funding for programs that supported large adoptive families. His book, 7+1, A Kid's Guide to Big Families, had been published by a small press specializing in children's social issues. The book, written from a child's perspective about adjusting to sudden family expansion, was being used by social workers across the Midwest to help prepare children for similar transitions. The twins, Connor and Caleb, now 12 years old, had channeled their creative energy into an after-school robotics program that Marcus had helped establish at the community center. Their unconventional approaches to problem solving, once seen as disruptive behavior, now won competitions and inspired other children to think creatively about engineering challenges. More significantly, the twins had become unofficial ambassadors for sibling adoption, visiting with prospective families and honestly discussing both the benefits and challenges of sudden family expansion. Their straightforward explanations often resonated with adults in ways that professional presentations couldn't match. It's loud and crazy sometimes, Caleb had told one prospective family, but it's loud and crazy. You always have someone to talk to, and you never have to face problems by yourself. 8-year-old Lily had blossomed into a confident child whose early fears of abandonment had been replaced by secure attachment and academic curiosity. Her kindergarten teacher's concerns about delayed social development had proven unfounded, as Lily became known for her ability to include isolated classmates in group activities, a skill clearly learned from watching her older siblings create space for everyone in their family. Baby Marcus, now 4 years old and no longer a baby, had grown up knowing only stability and love. His early development milestones were all on track, but more importantly, he displayed the kind of confident security that comes from never doubting his place in the world. His favorite game involved lining up toys representing all his siblings and making sure none were left out of imaginary adventures. Sophia, now 11 and in 6th grade, had become the family historian, maintaining scrapbooks and photo albums that documented their growth as a family. Her grief counselor had long since declared her progress complete, noting that Sophia had learned to hold memories of her mother alongside joy in her current family without seeing them as contradictory. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Sophia's development was her natural ability to help other children facing family transitions. When new students arrived at school from difficult circumstances, teachers often paired them with Sophia, whose combination of empathy and practical wisdom helped newcomers feel less alone. The ripple effects extended beyond the children to the broader community. Cedar Falls had gained recognition as a model for family-friendly policies, attracting young families who valued the town's commitment to supporting diverse household structures. Property values in Marcus's neighborhood had risen as families sought homes near the supportive network that had developed around the Rodriguez family. Local businesses had adapted their practices to better serve large families, offering bulk discounts and flexible scheduling for parents managing multiple children's activities. The school district had implemented new programs specifically designed to support children from complex family backgrounds, recognizing that academic success often required addressing underlying stability needs. Dr. Patricia Henley had established a support fund for families facing medical crises, inspired by her memory of Linda Rodriguez and her observations of how Marcus had rebuilt his life. After devastating loss, the fund provided both financial assistance and family coordination services, helping prevent family breakdown during health emergencies. Ruth Kowalski, now 74 and thriving in her assisted living community, had become a sought-after speaker about kinship care and the difficult decisions grandparents face when their own limitations conflict with their grandchildren's needs. Her decision to transfer her house to Marcus had been documented in social work journals as an innovative solution that preserved family bonds while ensuring adequate care. "I gave up my house, but I gained peace of mind," Ruth often told audiences. "Those children are still my grandchildren, and now they have a father who understands that family isn't about blood. It's about choice and commitment." The Rodriguez initiative that Marcus presented to the city council that evening included specific policy recommendations based on their family's experience. Financial support programs would help large adoptive families manage the initial costs of expansion. Housing assistance would ensure that families had adequate space for multiple children. Educational support would help children transition between schools while maintaining sibling connections. Most importantly, the initiative included provisions for ongoing family support, rather than the typical front-loaded services that tapered off after initial placement. Marcus had learned that large families needed sustained community support to remain stable, not just during crisis periods, but throughout the long process of building new family cultures. The traditional model assumes that successful adoption means families eventually stop needing help, Marcus explained to the council. But what we've discovered is that successful families are ones that learn to ask for help when they need it and offer help when they can provide it. Community support isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of wisdom. The council voted unanimously to fund the pilot program, with implementation beginning the following fall. But the evening's most powerful moment came during the final public comment period, when a woman Marcus didn't recognize approached the microphone. "My name is Jennifer Walsh," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "6 months ago, my husband and I were considering divorce because we couldn't agree about adopting my sister's 3 children. After she died, I thought 3 kids would destroy our marriage. My husband thought splitting them up would destroy them." She paused, gathering her composure. "Then someone told us about the Rodriguez family, and we realized we were asking the wrong question. Instead of asking whether we could handle 3 more children, we started asking whether those children deserved to stay together. Once we changed the question, the answer became obvious." Jennifer continued, "Those 3 children have been with us for months now, and they've made our family stronger, not weaker. They've taught our biological children about resilience, about loyalty, and about what really matters in life. We came here tonight to say thank you to a family that showed us what courage looks like." As the meeting concluded and families filtered out of the council chambers, Marcus found himself surrounded by people sharing their own stories of expanded families, sibling connections, and the transformative power of choosing love over convenience. Children who had been separated from siblings years earlier spoke about renewed connections. Adults who had aged out of foster care alone described their determination to ensure other children had different experiences. Frank Patterson approached Marcus with news that their construction company had been selected to build the state's first purpose-designed facility for large adoptive families. Emergency housing with multiple bedrooms that could accommodate sibling groups while permanent placements were arranged. "You've shown us that with the right support, families can be bigger and stronger than we ever imagined," Patterson said. "Now let's build the infrastructure to make sure other families have the same opportunities." As Marcus drove home that evening, past the elementary school where Linda had volunteered, past the church where they had been married, past the park where they had taken Sophia for weekend picnics. He reflected on the journey that had brought him from a man convinced he was failing one child to someone whose family had become a model for others. The house on Elm Street was ablaze with lights as he pulled into the driveway. Through the windows, he could see homework being completed. At the kitchen table, video games being played in the living room, and bedtime stories being read in the den. It was organized chaos, but it was their organized chaos, built on a foundation of love that had proven strong enough to support not just 8 lives, but an entire community's understanding of what family could mean. Linda's photographs still held places of honor throughout the house, not as shrines to the past, but as reminders that love multiplies when shared freely. Sophia had been right when she told classmates that families could be built in different ways. The Rodriguez family was living proof that the best families were often the ones that seemed impossible from the outside, but felt inevitable from within. As Marcus entered his house full of children who had chosen him as surely as he had chosen them, he understood that the bravest act hadn't been taking in 7 children when he could barely manage one. The bravest act had been believing that love was enough to build something lasting, even when logic suggested otherwise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to support other families, and new evidence that the ripple effects of one brave decision could transform entire communities. But tonight, Marcus Rodriguez was simply a father coming home to a family that had taught him the difference between surviving and thriving, a difference measured not in what they had overcome, but in what they had become together. 5 years after the Rodriguez Initiative became official policy in Cedar Falls, Marcus stood in the crowded auditorium of the University of Michigan School of Social Work, adjusting his tie nervously as he prepared to deliver the keynote address at their annual Family Preservation Conference. The irony wasn't lost on him. A former foster child who had once believed he was destined to remain alone was about to address hundreds of professionals dedicated to keeping families together. The invitation had come through Dr. Rebecca Chen, a professor who had been following the Rodriguez family's story since the early days of their unconventional beginning. Her longitudinal study of large adoptive families had made Marcus and his children somewhat famous in academic circles, though they remained refreshingly grounded in their daily lives in Cedar Falls. 10 years ago, I thought success meant surviving. Marcus began, looking out at an audience that included social workers, policymakers, adoptive parents, and graduate students. I measured my worth by my ability to avoid the mistakes that had shaped my childhood. I never imagined that true success would mean choosing to embrace the very thing I had always feared, depending on others and allowing others to depend on me. In the third row, Ethan Rodriguez sat with his fiancée, Rachel Martinez, a fellow computer science graduate student he had met at Michigan State. At 24, Ethan bore little resemblance to the angry, defensive teenager who had once threatened to run away with his siblings. His success in college had led to a prestigious internship with a tech company in Detroit, where he was developing educational software designed specifically for children in foster care. The app we're creating helps kids track their siblings when they get separated by the system, Ethan had explained to Marcus during a recent visit home. It maintains connections that the bureaucracy often can't. If families can't be kept together physically, at least they can stay connected emotionally. Ethan's work had gained national attention when several states began piloting his sibling connection platform. But more importantly to Marcus, Ethan had maintained the protective instincts that had served his family well, while learning to channel them into productive advocacy rather than defensive opposition. Maya, now 21 and a junior at Western Michigan University studying education and social work, had spent her summer internship with Jana Sullivan's department, which had been renamed the Office of Family Innovation, in recognition of its pioneering work with unconventional placements. Maya's natural leadership abilities had evolved into sophisticated program management skills, and she was already being recruited by organizations working on national foster care reform. Her senior thesis project involved creating support networks for teenagers who were adopted as older children. recognizing that successful transition required ongoing community investment rather than just legal documentation. The project had attracted funding from the state legislature, allowing Maya to pilot her approach in 3 counties. People assume that once the adoption is finalized, the hard work is over. Maya had written in her thesis proposal, but that's when the real work begins, learning to trust that this placement is different from all the others, that this family is permanent even when conflicts arise. Tyler, now 19 and a sophomore at Central Michigan University, had surprised everyone by choosing journalism as his major. Though his focus remained firmly on social justice issues, his articles about foster care reform had been published in several state newspapers, and he was working on a documentary about sibling separation that had already received interest from regional television stations. His speech challenges had become an asset in his writing career, teaching him to choose words carefully and construct arguments with precision. Tyler's ability to translate complex social issues into accessible language had made him a sought-after contributor to policy discussions at the state level. Tyler has a gift for making people understand that statistics represent real children with real losses, Dr. Chen had noted in her research. His writing helps policymakers see the human cost of bureaucratic decisions. The twins, Connor and Caleb, now 17 and high school seniors, had earned full scholarships to Michigan Tech based on their robotics achievements and innovative engineering solutions. Their unconventional approaches to problem solving, once viewed as behavioral issues, were now recognized as creative thinking that could revolutionize traditional engineering practices. More significantly, they had established a mentoring program that paired teenagers from large families with elementary school children, teaching younger kids that having many siblings was a source of strength rather than something to be embarrassed about. The program had reduced bullying incidents related to family structure by nearly 40% in participating schools. 13-year-old Lily had evolved into a confident middle schooler whose early fears of abandonment had been replaced by remarkable emotional intelligence. She served as a peer mediator at her school, helping other students navigate conflicts and transitions. Her teachers consistently noted her ability to help classmates feel included and valued, skills clearly learned from growing up in a family that had mastered the art of making room for everyone. 9-year-old Marcus, who still went by Little Marcus to distinguish him from his father, had grown up knowing only stability and love. His kindergarten teacher had described him as naturally inclusive, always ensuring that no classmate was left out of games or activities. At 9, he was already showing signs of the leadership qualities that seemed to run through the Rodriguez family. Sophia, now 16 and a high school junior, had become the family's unofficial archivist and storyteller. Her college application essays about growing up in a large adoptive family had been shared by admissions counselors as examples of resilience and gratitude. But more importantly, Sophia had developed into a confident young woman who spoke openly about grief healing and the different ways families could be formed. Her volunteer work with children's grief counseling programs had led to recognition from the state's Department of Mental Health, and she was considering a career in child psychology. I learned that you can miss someone who died and still be happy about the life you're living. Sophia often told younger children dealing with loss, both feelings can be true at the same time. But perhaps the most remarkable development in the Rodriguez family story was the addition of 2 more children who had joined them 3 years earlier, when the state faced another crisis involving siblings who couldn't be placed together. This time 3 children ages 6, 8, and 10 whose parents had died in a car accident. Marcus and his family had made the decision to expand once again. The newest Rodriguez children, David, Sarah, and Michael Thompson, had brought their own challenges and gifts to the family dynamic. David's autism required specialized attention and advocacy, but his mathematical abilities had impressed even Connor and Caleb. Sarah's artistic talents had added new dimensions to the family's creative expression, while Michael's athletic skills had introduced competitive sports to a household that had previously focused more on academic achievements. People ask me if 10 children is too many. Marcus had told Dr. Chen during her most recent family visit. But the question isn't really about numbers. It's about capacity for love and commitment to growth. We've learned that families expand to meet the love that's available, not the other way around. The expansion hadn't been without challenges. The Victorian house had required additional modifications to accommodate 10 children, and the financial pressures remained significant, despite Marcus's success with Patterson Custom Homes. But the older Rodriguez children had embraced their newest siblings with the same fierce loyalty that had characterized their own transition years earlier. Ethan had taken on a big brother role with David, spending hours working on mathematical puzzles that challenged David's abilities while building his confidence. Maya had helped Sarah navigate the social complexities of middle school, drawing on her own experiences with sudden family expansion. Tyler had included Michael in his athletic activities, while the twins had taught all three newcomers their philosophy of creative problem solving. The ripple effects of the Rodriguez family's continued growth had spread far beyond Cedar Falls. Marcus's keynote address at the University of Michigan was part of a national speaking tour that had taken him to conferences in 12 states. His message was simple but revolutionary. Families could be built intentionally through love and commitment, and society's role should be supporting those efforts rather than limiting them based on conventional assumptions. We've learned that the question isn't whether one person can handle multiple children, Marcus told his audience. The question is whether a community can support families that choose to grow through love rather than biology. When communities say yes to that question, remarkable things become possible. The Rodriguez Initiative had been adopted in 43 counties across 7 states, with evaluation data showing significantly improved outcomes for sibling groups who were kept together. Children in the program showed better academic performance, lower rates of behavioral problems, and higher levels of emotional stability compared to siblings who were separated into different placements. But the statistics, while important, didn't capture the full impact of what Marcus and his family had set in motion. In the audience at the University of Michigan sat representatives from 12 families who had followed the Rodriguez model, taking in sibling groups that traditional placements couldn't accommodate. Their combined households included 67 children who might otherwise have been separated from their brothers and sisters. Jonna Sullivan, now director of the Michigan Office of Family Innovation, had accompanied Marcus to the conference to present data on the statewide expansion of sibling preservation programs. Her research showed that communities with strong family support networks saw not only better outcomes for children in care, but also reduced long-term costs for social services, mental health interventions, and criminal justice involvement. The Rodriguez family proved that investing in family preservation pays dividends for generations. Sullivan explained during her presentation, children who grow up with sibling connections are more likely to maintain family relationships as adults, more likely to provide support for aging relatives, and more likely to create stable families of their own. The conference's most powerful moment came during a panel discussion featuring young adults who had been part of large adoptive families. Ethan spoke about his upcoming wedding and his plans to create a family with Rachel that would honor the values he had learned growing up with 9 siblings. Maya discussed her career plans and her commitment to systemic change in child welfare practices. But the most moving testimony came from David Thompson, now 9 years old and still adjusting to life with the Rodriguez family. When asked what he wanted people to know about being adopted into a large family, David's response was characteristically direct. Before, I was scared all the time because I didn't know if Sarah and Michael and I would get to stay together, he said, his words carefully chosen. Now I'm not scared anymore because I have so many people who take care of me, and I take care of them too. The panel discussion was followed by a reception where Marcus found himself surrounded by social workers, policy makers, and prospective adoptive parents seeking advice about expanding their own families. The conversations ranged from practical questions about logistics and financing to deeper discussions about the emotional challenges and rewards of intentional family building. One conversation particularly struck Marcus, a discussion with Dr. Patricia Mullins, the caseworker who had once recommended separating his family, now approaching retirement. Mullins had become one of the strongest advocates for the Rodriguez model, using her experience with their case to train other social workers about the importance of creative problem-solving and family preservation. "You taught me that my job wasn't to protect children from complex family situations," Mullins told Marcus during a quiet moment at the reception. "My job was to help create family situations stable enough to handle complexity. That's a lesson I've carried into every case since." As the conference concluded and participants returned to their home communities, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from a man convinced he was failing one child to someone whose family had become a model for others around the country. The success wasn't measured just in the stability of his own household, but in the hundreds of children who had been kept with their siblings because of programs inspired by their example. The drive back to Cedar Falls took him past familiar landmarks: the hospital where Linda had died, the church where they had been married, the elementary school where Sophia had first struggled with grief. But now these places held different meanings, representing not just personal loss but community growth, not just individual healing but collective commitment to supporting families in all their diverse forms. As Marcus pulled into the driveway of the Victorian house on Elm Street, he could see lights in every window and hear the familiar sounds of 10 children engaged in various evening activities. Homework was being completed, video games were being played, music was being practiced, and stories were being shared. It was organized chaos, but it was their organized chaos, built on a foundation of love that had proven strong enough to support not just their own family, but an entire movement toward more inclusive definitions of what families could be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to support other families, and new evidence that the ripple effects of one brave decision could transform entire communities. But tonight, Marcus Rodriguez was simply a father coming home to a family that had taught him the difference between surviving and thriving, a difference that was now being learned by families across the country who had chosen love over limitation, growth over comfort, and possibility over convention. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late November, exactly 15 years after Marcus had first walked into Ruth Kowalski's house to meet 7 children who would change his life forever. Marcus was reviewing blueprints for Patterson Custom Homes' latest project, a residential facility for large foster families, when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is Amanda Foster from the Wayne County Department of Children and Family Services in Detroit. I'm hoping you might be able to help us with an unusual situation." Marcus set down his coffee, immediately recognizing the tone of desperation that had once characterized his own phone calls to social workers. "What can I do for you? We have 11 siblings," Amanda continued, her voice tight with stress. "Ages 3 to 17. Their grandmother was caring for them, but she suffered a stroke last week and can't continue. We're facing the possibility of splitting them across multiple foster homes because no one facility can accommodate such a large group." The numbers were staggering even by Rodriguez family standards. 11 children would require resources and space that challenged even the most dedicated families. But Marcus found himself asking the same question that had guided his decisions for the past 15 years, not whether it was practical, but whether it was right. "Tell me about the children," Marcus said, pulling out a notepad. "What are their circumstances?" The story that emerged was heartbreakingly familiar. The children's parents had died in a house fire 2 years earlier, leaving behind siblings who ranged from toddlers to teenagers. Their grandmother, Patricia Williams, had taken them all, and despite her advanced age and limited resources, determined to keep the family together. For 2 years, she had managed through sheer determination and community support. But her recent stroke had left her unable to care for even herself, let alone 11 grieving children. The oldest is 17-year-old Marcus Williams, Amanda explained, and Marcus felt a jolt of recognition at the shared name. He's been homeschooled to help care for the younger ones. Then there's 15-year-old Angela, who basically runs the household. The middle children range from 7 to 13, and we have twins who just turned 4. As Amanda described each child's personality and needs, Marcus recognized patterns that echoed his own family's early dynamics. The older children had assumed adult responsibilities out of necessity. The middle children were caught between helping with younger siblings and trying to maintain their own childhoods. The youngest ones were showing signs of attachment disorders from too many disruptions in their caregiving. What makes this particularly challenging, Amanda continued, is that several of the children have special needs. 10-year-old Deshawn has autism and requires structured routines. 8-year-old Precious has been diagnosed with ADHD and needs consistent behavioral support. And the 3-year-old Little Harmony was born with a heart condition that requires regular medical monitoring. Marcus found himself calculating space requirements, financial needs, and support systems in his head. The Victorian house that had seemed impossibly large when he first saw it was now home to 10 children and would struggle to accommodate 11 more, even temporarily. But he also knew that 21 children facing separation represented exactly the kind of crisis the Rodriguez Initiative had been designed to address. "I need to discuss this with my family," Marcus told Amanda, "but can you give me 48 hours before any decisions are made about placement?" That evening, Marcus called a family meeting around the kitchen table that had witnessed so many important conversations over the years. The 10 Rodriguez children, now ranging in age from 14 to 29, listened as he explained the situation facing the Williams siblings. The discussion that followed revealed how much his children had internalized the values that had shaped their own family's formation. Ethan, now 29 and recently married, spoke first. "Rachel and I have been talking about starting our own family. We have a 4-bedroom house and stable income. We could take some of the younger children." Maya, 26, and working as a policy director for the state's Family Services Department, immediately began calculating resources. "The Rodriguez Initiative includes emergency housing provisions now. We could access temporary funding for facility modifications and increased support services." Tyler, 24 and working as an investigative journalist, offered a different perspective. "This could be an opportunity to document the process in real time, show how communities can mobilize to keep large sibling groups together." The younger Rodriguez children approached the discussion with the matter-of-fact acceptance that had always characterized their family's approach to expansion. 16-year-old Sophia, now a high school senior, pointed out that she had experience helping younger children adjust to new family situations. 14-year-old Little Marcus suggested that their house's basement could be converted into additional bedrooms, but it was David Thompson, now 12 and still the family's most direct communicator, who cut to the heart of the matter. "Are we going to help them or not? Because if we are, we should stop talking and start planning." The next 24 hours involved intensive coordination between multiple agencies, family members, and community organizations. Marcus contacted Frank Patterson about emergency housing modifications. Maya reached out to her network of social workers and policymakers. Ethan and Rachel prepared their home to accommodate 3 of the younger Williams children. Tyler began documenting the process for a potential news series about family preservation. But the most crucial conversation happened when Marcus visited Patricia Williams in her rehabilitation facility. The 78-year-old woman was confined to a wheelchair and struggling with speech impairments from her stroke, but her eyes remained sharp and determined. "I know you," she managed to say when Marcus introduced himself. "Saw you on television. You take big families." Marcus pulled a chair close to Patricia's bedside. "I want to help, but I need to understand what you want for your grandchildren. This is your decision as much as anyone's." Patricia's response came slowly, but with unmistakable clarity. "Together. Keep them together, whatever it takes." The plan that emerged was more complex than any previous Rodriguez family expansion. The 11 Williams children would be split between 3 households initially, 7 with Marcus and his family, 3 with Ethan and Rachel, and 1 teenager with Maya, who had recently moved into her own apartment. The arrangement would be temporary while a permanent solution was developed, but it would keep the siblings in close proximity and maintain their connection to each other. The logistics were staggering. Marcus's house required immediate modifications to accommodate 7 additional children, including converting the basement into proper bedrooms and upgrading bathrooms to handle increased usage. Emergency funding from the Rodriguez Initiative covered most expenses, but the emotional preparation proved more challenging than the physical arrangements. The current Rodriguez children had grown up with gradual family expansion, but suddenly adding 7 siblings represented a shock to their established routines and relationships. Marcus spent hours with each child, discussing their concerns and ensuring they felt heard and valued during the transition. "It's going to be chaos for a while," he told them honestly, "but we've handled chaos before, and we've always come through stronger." The day the Williams children moved in was controlled pandemonium. 17-year-old Marcus Williams arrived with the protective wariness that Marcus Rodriguez remembered from Ethan's early days. 15-year-old Angela carried herself with the premature maturity of a teenager who had been running a household. The middle children clung to their older siblings while eyeing their new surroundings with curiosity and apprehension. The youngest, Williams' children required the most careful attention. 4-year-old twins Jasmine and Justice had barely spoken since their grandmother's stroke, communicating primarily through gestures and whispers to each other. 3-year-old Harmony's heart condition required careful monitoring and medication management that added medical complexity to an already challenging situation. But within hours, the natural dynamics that had always characterized the Rodriguez household began incorporating the newcomers. Sophia took charge of helping the Williams girls settle into their shared bedrooms. Little Marcus and David included the younger Williams boys in their ongoing video game tournament. The older Rodriguez children naturally paired with Williams, siblings of similar ages, creating mentoring relationships that eased the transition. The most remarkable moment came during the first dinner, with all 17 children present. The dining room table, expanded with card tables and borrowed chairs, barely accommodated everyone. But as Marcus looked around at the mixture of faces, some familiar from years of shared meals, others still adjusting to their new surroundings, he recognized the same sense of chosen family that had characterized every Rodriguez expansion. "This is what we do," Maya whispered to Marcus as they watched the children negotiate seating arrangements and food preferences with remarkable cooperation. "We make room for everyone." The weeks that followed tested every system and routine the Rodriguez family had developed over 15 years. Bedtime required military precision to coordinate bathroom usage among 17 children. Breakfast became a cafeteria-style operation that started at 6 a.m. and continued until everyone was fed and ready for school. Transportation to various schools and activities required multiple vehicles and careful scheduling. But the challenges were balanced by unexpected joys. Marcus Williams revealed himself to be a gifted musician who brought new dimensions to family entertainment. Angela's cooking skills supplemented Marcus's efforts to feed the expanded household. Deshawn's autism, which had been seen as a limitation in previous placements, proved to be an asset in a family that valued different ways of thinking and being. Most importantly, the Williams children began to believe that this placement might actually be permanent. The older siblings gradually relaxed their hypervigilant protection of younger ones as they observed the stability and commitment that characterized the Rodriguez household. The younger children started sleeping through the night and engaging in normal childhood activities that had been impossible during their period of uncertainty. 3 months after the Williams children moved in, Marcus received a call that brought the story full circle. Ruth Kowalski, now 81 and still living independently in her assisted living facility, wanted to visit the family she had helped create 15 years earlier. "I need to see what became of my investment," Ruth said with the directness that Marcus remembered fondly. "I gave you 7 children and a house. You've turned it into something I never could have imagined." Ruth's visit coincided with the official adoption ceremony for the Williams children, held in the same courthouse where Marcus had formalized his relationship with the original 7 Kowalski children. Judge Margaret Foster, now nearing retirement, presided over proceedings that represented the culmination of her career-long commitment to family preservation. 15 years ago, this court took a chance on an unconventional family arrangement. Judge Foster said as she signed the final adoption papers, "Today, we celebrate not just the creation of another family, but the proof that love really can multiply when it's shared freely." As Marcus looked around the courtroom filled with 17 children, who now legally bore his name, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from a man convinced he was failing one child to someone responsible for nurturing nearly 24 young lives. The transformation hadn't been easy or predictable, but it had been guided by principles that Linda had taught him years earlier. Families could be built in many different ways, and love was something you chose to give rather than something you earned. At the celebration afterward, held at the renovated Victorian house that had become a symbol of possibility for unconventional families, drew hundreds of community members who had supported the Rodriguez family's journey. Former foster children who had been inspired by their example brought their own families. Social workers shared stories of other sibling groups they had been able to keep together because of programs the Rodriguez family had pioneered. But the most meaningful moment came when Patricia Williams, transported from her rehabilitation facility in a wheelchair, was able to see her 11 grandchildren thriving in their new family structure. Her speech had improved enough for her to address the gathering with words that captured the essence of what Marcus had learned. Over 15 years of intentional family building, love makes room. She said slowly but clearly, "When we choose to love, there's always room." As the evening wound down and the extended Rodriguez family settled into their nighttime routines, Marcus stood in the doorway of the house that had sheltered so many dreams and weathered so many challenges. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new opportunities to support other families, and new evidence that the bravest acts often began with the simple decision to say yes. When others said it was impossible, the little boy who had aged out of foster care believing he was destined to be alone had become the father of 17 children who would never doubt their worth or their place in the world. It was a transformation that proved the power of chosen family, the importance of community support, and the infinite capacity of love to create something beautiful. From the most unlikely circumstances, 20 years after Marcus Rodriguez first stood in Ruth Kowalski's living room and met 7 children who would reshape his understanding of family, he found himself in an unexpected place, testifying before the United States Senate Subcommittee on Children and Families about the future of American foster care. The hearing room was packed with advocates, social workers, and families whose lives had been touched by the movement that began in a small Michigan town with one man's decision to say yes when logic said no. Senator Patricia Walsh, the committee chair, introduced Marcus with words that would have seemed impossible during those desperate early days. After Linda's death, our witness today has transformed not just his own family, but our national understanding of what families can become when supported by community commitment and unconditional love. At 52, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had learned that strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with an open heart. His testimony would focus on the Rodriguez Family Act, proposed federal legislation that would provide funding and support for keeping large sibling groups together, a bill inspired by decades of success stories that had started in Cedar Falls. 20 years ago, I believed my greatest fear was being alone, Marcus began, his voice steady as he addressed senators who held the power to change thousands of lives. Today I understand that isolation was never the real danger. The real danger was believing that love has limits, that families must fit predetermined molds, and that some children are worth less effort than others. In the gallery behind him sat a remarkable collection of witnesses to his journey. Ethan Rodriguez Martinez, now 34, and a successful technology entrepreneur, had brought his own 3 children to see their grandfather testify. His company's Sibling Connection software was now used in 47 states, keeping separated brothers and sisters linked across thousands of miles and bureaucratic barriers. Maya Rodriguez Williams, 31 and recently appointed as Michigan's Director of Child Welfare Innovation, held her infant daughter while her husband managed their toddler son. Her doctoral dissertation on family preservation had become required reading in social work programs across the country, and her policy innovations were being studied by international child welfare organizations. Tyler Rodriguez, 29, and now a Pulitzer Prize nominee for his investigative series on foster care reform, was live tweeting the hearing to his 200,000 followers. His documentary about sibling separation had aired on national television the previous year, generating enough public pressure to push the Rodriguez Family Act onto the legislative agenda. The twins, Connor and Caleb Rodriguez, now 27, and partners in their own engineering firm, had revolutionized emergency shelter design for large families. Their modular housing systems could be deployed within hours to accommodate sibling groups of any size, preventing the need for immediate separation while permanent placements were arranged. 23-year-old Lily Rodriguez sat with her fiancé, a fellow social worker she had met while coordinating youth programs. Her master's thesis on attachment theory in large adoptive families had challenged conventional wisdom about optimal family sizes and demonstrated that children's emotional security depended more on consistency of care than number of siblings. 19-year-old Marcus Rodriguez Jr. attended virtually from his freshman year at Met, where he was studying biomedical engineering with a focus on pediatric cardiology. Inspired by his youngest sister Harmony's early heart condition, his research on remote monitoring for children with medical needs was already attracting attention from major hospitals. 21-year-old Sofia Rodriguez had become a licensed family therapist specializing in grief counseling for children. Her waiting list was 6 months long, filled with families who specifically requested the therapist who understood that children could hold love and loss simultaneously without contradiction. The newest Rodriguez children had grown into their own remarkable achievements. Marcus Williams, now 22, had graduated from Michigan State with a degree in music therapy and was working with hospitalized children. His guitar had provided soundtrack to countless family moments over the years, and his therapeutic work was helping other young patients find healing through music. Angela Williams Rodriguez, 20, was studying to become a registered nurse, following a path that honored both Linda's memory and her own calling to care for others. Her experience managing a household of 17 children had taught her organizational skills that impressed even veteran nursing supervisors. The middle Williams children had each found their own paths to success. Deshawn's autism, once seen as a barrier to placement, had become his greatest strength as he pursued a degree in computer programming. With an intuitive understanding of systems and patterns, Precious had channeled her ADHD energy into competitive athletics, earning a full scholarship to run track at Central Michigan University. The youngest Williams children, now teenagers, displayed the confidence and security that came from growing up in a family that had never questioned their worth or belonging. The twins, Jasmine and Justice, now 14, were honor roll students who volunteered with younger children in the community's expanded mentoring programs. 13-year-old Harmony, her heart condition now successfully managed through advances in pediatric cardiology, was captain of her middle school debate team. But perhaps the most powerful testimony came from the families who had followed the Rodriguez model. In the hearing room sat representatives from 127 households across 38 states who had taken in sibling groups that traditional placements couldn't accommodate. Their combined households included over 800 children who had been kept together because of programs and policies inspired by Marcus's example. The Rodriguez family proved that the question was never whether it was possible to support large adoptive families, testified Dr. Rebecca Chen, whose longitudinal research had tracked their success for 2 decades. The question was whether society was willing to invest in making it possible. The data shows unequivocally that children who remain with siblings have better outcomes in every measurable category: academic achievement, emotional stability, future relationship success, and long-term mental health. The hearing's most emotional moment came when Senator Walsh read letters from young adults who had aged out of foster care alone. describing their ongoing struggles with attachment, identity, and family formation. Their words provided stark contrast to testimonies from Rodriguez children, who had maintained sibling bonds and built successful adult lives, characterized by strong relationships and community connection. Mr. Rodriguez, Senator Walsh said as the formal testimony concluded, "What would you say to critics who argue that your family's success is an anomaly that can't be replicated on a larger scale?" Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "Senator, I understand the skepticism because I once shared it. I thought love was a limited resource that got weaker when divided among too many people. But 20 years of experience has taught me that love actually multiplies when it's shared freely. Every child who finds permanent family placement frees up resources to help the next child. Every family that chooses to expand creates space for siblings who might otherwise be separated." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Rodriguez family isn't unique because we have extraordinary capabilities. We're unique because we had extraordinary support. When communities invest in families with financial assistance, educational resources, medical care, and emotional support, remarkable things become possible. The question isn't whether other families can replicate our success. The question is whether other communities are willing to provide the support that makes success achievable. The Rodriguez Family Act passed the Senate by a margin of 73 to 27 weeks later, with bipartisan support that reflected growing recognition that family preservation was both morally imperative and fiscally responsible. The legislation provided federal funding for sibling preservation programs, emergency housing for large families, and comprehensive support services that addressed the complex needs of children who had experienced trauma and loss. But for Marcus, the most meaningful validation came not from legislative victories or academic recognition, but from the simple moments that continued to fill the Victorian house on Elm Street. Sunday dinners still required multiple tables and careful coordination, but they remained the week's highlight for children who ranged in age from 13 to 34. Holiday celebrations had evolved into extended family reunions that included spouses, grandchildren, and chosen family members who had been welcomed into the Rodriguez circle over the years. Ruth Kowalski, now 84 and still sharp despite her advancing age, remained an honorary grandmother whose weekly visits were anticipated by multiple generations of Rodriguez children. Her original decision to give her house to a stranger, rather than watch her grandchildren be separated, had created ripple effects that touched thousands of lives across the country. "I gave Marcus 7 children and a house," Ruth often told visitors who came to hear her story. "He gave those children a future and gave me peace of mind. But more than that, he proved that families aren't about blood or biology. They're about the daily choice to show up for each other, especially when it's difficult." The house itself had become a pilgrimage site of sorts for families considering large adoptions, social workers seeking inspiration for creative placements, and policymakers studying successful family preservation models. Marcus welcomed the visitors, understanding that their story belonged not just to them, but to everyone who believed that children deserved families rather than systems. On quiet evenings, when the current residents had settled into homework and bedtime routines, Marcus would often sit in the living room where he had first met the Kowalski children and reflect on the journey that had brought him from desperate isolation to the center of a movement that was transforming child welfare across the nation. The photographs on the mantelpiece told the story better than any official documentation. Linda's picture held the place of honor, reminding everyone that love creates legacy even when life is cut short. Ruth's photo represented the courage to trust strangers with precious cargo. Pictures of graduations, weddings, grandchildren, and family celebrations showed the ongoing multiplication of love that began with one man's decision to believe that families could be bigger and stronger than conventional wisdom suggested. The final photograph, added just last month, showed all 17 Rodriguez children gathered for the wedding of Angela Williams Rodriguez. In the picture, Marcus stood surrounded by young adults who had once been broken, scared children facing separation and uncertainty. Their faces showed the confidence and joy that came from growing up knowing they belonged somewhere, that they mattered to someone, and that love really could conquer the worst circumstances life could create. As Marcus turned off the lights and headed upstairs to the bedroom he had once shared with Linda, he carried with him the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to support families in crisis, new evidence that love multiplied when shared, and new proof that the bravest acts often began with the simple decision to say yes when everyone else said it was impossible. The man who had once believed he was destined to be alone had become the father of 17 children who would never doubt their worth, the grandfather of growing numbers of little ones who would inherit a legacy of unconditional love, and the inspiration for a movement that would touch countless lives for generations to come. In the end, Marcus Rodriguez had discovered that the single dad who took in a family of 7 no one wanted hadn't just changed a whole town. With one brave act, he had changed the world's understanding of what families could become. When communities chose love over limitation, possibility over convention, and hope over fear. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.